everyone. Welcome back to the Prestige Junkie podcast. I am Katey Rich. I'm the awards editor here at The Ankler, and this week my guest co-host is in the mountains of Colorado as we speak, here to tell me everything that I am missing. By the time you hear this, I will have missed all of it at the Telluride Film Festival. It's the chief film critic at Indiewire and my longtime podcast co-host on Fighting in the War Room. Hi, David Ehrlich.
I've never heard of you before in my life. Hi, I'm in the mountains of madness, Telluride, Colorado, yes.
It's really the ideal circumstance to catch you in, because on our other podcasts we do together, you'll sometimes just send like 20-minute long voice memos, like talking to yourself in a lonely hotel room, and now we get to talk to each other.
Usually on some sort of prescribed pharmaceuticals, yeah. But for the Anklers listeners, I know you all are far too classy for that, so
we take
I am
this way
perfectly
too seriously
sober
for that.
And ready. I didn't even have a drink at the neon cocktail party.
Wow.
So
the sacrifices you make for me.
I haven't slept a lot, but other than that,
well,
ready to go.
That's to be expected. So after David and I talk about Telluride, listeners, you'll hear my conversation with Willa Fitzgerald. She's the star of this summer's real breakout thriller, I think, Strange Darling. And she was able to get into some spoilers with me in our conversation, which I thought was really exciting. David, have you seen Strange Darling? I don't remember if we've talked about it.
I haven't. I would very much like to. I hear all sorts of things, but it sounds very intriguing.
I think people will be hearing about her later this year, so I'm excited for people to maybe meet her here. Okay, so David, to talk about Telluride, I was going to start by looking back at the results of the poll we had on last week's episode. I had Sean Fennessy on. We kind of handicapped Telluride, looked ahead at which titles we thought would get the most awards buzz at Telluride. And actually, do you want to guess what you thought of the titles we were likely to talk about, what our listeners would have said would be the buzziest film coming out of Telluride?
Purely in terms of awards potential?
Yes, that is what we do here.
I would imagine that Conclave would be up there.
Conclave was second place.
Okay.
It was a good guess. It was 23% of the vote.
Dare I imagine that Saturday Night was in the poll position?
No, I actually didn't put it on the poll, which I should have, but we'll get there.
No.
This may be a trick question because it's not technically premiering at Telluride, but Honora ran away with the votes.
That is
with
a trick
56%.
question.
Yeah, I know. It's not fair.
Also, I don't know if it's going to be the right answer, but in a just world, it would be.
Well, so you didn't see Honora here. You saw it at Cannes, but I get the sense it's going over very well there, as many neon films that won the Palme d'Or have done at Telluride in the past.
Yeah, I have a feeling that Honora is really going to explode over the next couple of months. It's already in the pre-screenings they've done in Toronto for critics up there, been rapturously received. Just about everybody I've spoken to on the ground here who saw it in Telluride loved it. I think Mikey Madison is such a freight train of a performance in the lead role. It's talking in the context of awards. That is one that I would love to see. I would love to see her and Saoirse Ronan really be the front runners for Best Actress. That would make me very happy. Oh,
wait, is the Outrun playing it? I know she's getting an award, so I guess the Outrun is playing at Telluride?
Yes, indeed.
Okay, hang on. That's jumping off the Honora train real quick, but we'll get back to that.
But both, two phenomenal actresses. Saoirse has been one of my favorites for so long. Mikey Madison, more recent favorite, but she is so incredible in Honora, commands every frame of that movie, and just commits every fiber of herself to that performance. And it's a raucous, electric movie that has a very serious undertow, and I think it's a very bittersweet aftertaste, and ends, as Sean Baker movies tend to do, with a devastating gut punch. I think it's a real potential juggernaut, and also just, for what it's worth in the Oscar conversation, that sometimes isn't a whole lot, one of the very best movies of the year. And so it's going to be fun to see it continue to accrue attention.
It's funny to have brought you here where I'm always asking about Oscar buzz and you spend your whole life being like, but that's not the whole thing. And it's a good and just cause that you fight for. I know.
Given Telluride's place in the awards race, it is sort of just in the air up here. and nothing else is because can't breathe. Anyway,
you mentioned the neon party. I know a lot of times you'll get celebrities kind of not totally incognito, but they're wearing jeans, they're walking down the street. Is Mikey Madison there? There's anyone you're really noticing popping out there?
Everybody is here.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a big return to form for Telluride. Not that the festival was at fault for actors not being able to be here last year with the strikes and COVID before that, but the studios, large and small, have made sure that all of their talent is in attendance. Oftentimes getting on planes directly from Venice and flying here in unimaginable short periods of time. But yeah, I saw Mikey Madison. Saoirse was at the Sony Pictures dinner last night. She will be there again in the Toronto equivalent of that same dinner next week. Peter Sarsgaard.
See you there.
I can't wait. Peter Sarsgaard has been in the audience just about every movie I've seen here, it feels.
Is he in a movie?
He's in a movie called September 5th, which is about.
I want to hear about that.
Olympics.
Actually, have you seen that one?
No.
Okay.
I have not seen it. I actually didn't even know it existed prior to the Venice and Telluride lineups coming out. It kind of came out of the blue.
Yeah, it's not playing in Toronto, so it was really low on my. And I don't think it has a distributor yet, but maybe by the time people hear this, that will have changed.
No. And it feels like such a vintage Toronto movie, so it's strange that it's not going to be there.
Hey, it could get added, I guess.
Yeah, well, at this point, it's getting a little late, but I think the program's already printed. But yeah, so I mean, it's definitely, that is the vibe. I was inadvertently elbowed really hard in the back, my lower back, by a major director while standing in line. I think inadvertently. Hard to say.
If you say it was inadvertently, I feel like you should be able to name names. Like, this isn't a feud. This is
I refuse. But at this point in my career, I can only hope that it was inadvertent. But that is just an indication of how closely everyone is thrown together here.
Yeah.
So Sean Baker's making the rounds, and everyone really.
Well, you mentioned Saoirse and Mikey Madison. Do they feel like the two who everyone's like the most eager? Like, are you sensing the buzz building around them or anybody else?
Well, certainly the buzz in terms of the performances that are exciting people, them and the cast of Emilia Perez, which is a movie that I'm not as high on, but the response to which has admittedly been really positive here. And in any of the categories, I mean, I think Best Supporting Actress is one where that movie could really take off. But I mean, Angelina Jolie, I was endeared to her performance in Maria, which played at Venice and in Telluride. I think it's a really interesting sort of metatextual match between actress and subject. I don't think the movie quite works. I was maybe even too generous to it in my B- Indiewire review. And I think
you've already started shifting your opinions days after writing it.
I mean, it's just I don't know. I think that movie, it doesn't quite hold together. I am generally a fan of Pablo Larraín's, but I think Jackie was really the high watermark for this trilogy of movies he's made about cloistered, famous 20th century women. So the narrative could take Angelina Jolie far. She has already won an Oscar, not a Best Actress Oscar, but and it's been a while since she's been in the spotlight in this way. So that could work in her favor. But I would, Saoirse is just, one of the greatest actresses alive, and Mikey Madison is so incredible. I would really love, and people are so excited about the performances. The Outrun is,
have you seen that one at Sundance? Or
I saw that at
Sundance.
Okay. And it's, on paper, it might sound, it's an autobiographical story of addiction and recovery, and it follows a familiar enough trajectory. It's very rugged and elemental in a way that makes it feel different, but her performance is so animated and primal, it does kind of feel like something you've never seen before, especially not from her. It's the first contemporary performance she's given in 10 years.
That's crazy.
And I mean, there are some asterisks there because
since Lady Bird.
Lady Bird is a period piece.
Are you telling this elder millennial that 2002 is in fact the past? Because I struggle with that.
I am just trying to be as pedantic as possible. I know the awards race people out there are err on that side. And Lady Bird was, for all intents and purposes, a period piece. The Outrun doesn't lean particularly hard into being set in 2023 or 24, but it is a contemporary film. But it is just an indication as to sort of where her work has been over the last 10 years, and it is just a thrilling reminder that she is an actress very much of the moment as well.
To stay on the actress theme for a while, I keep hearing about The Friend. Is The Friend,
nope.
Naomi Watts is not there? Dang. You haven't seen that one?
My one word review of The Friend was woof.
Okay.
I'm not a particular outlier. I mean, I think I'm maybe harsher than most just because I immediately bounced off that movie and then had to sit through it for 100 minutes and was just, I felt like it was sort of dead on arrival to me. It is certainly not a movie with any sort of malicious intent or reason to hate. It's quite pleasant. I love Naomi Watts typically, and I feel like she just does not find a way into this character. It was very flat for me. The movie,
But people are liking it.
Yeah, not in a significant way, I would say.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
I think it's also a very small movie. It's another like Toronto mid-level sort of programmer type. Seen in another context, it would not in a million years strike me as something that would be in the awards conversation. And I would actually still maintain that opinion. The dog people I know, and I used to think I was one before I saw The Friend.
The dog is
a star. The dog is the anatomy of a fault dog of 2024 for sure. And the dog is, can I swear on this podcast? I mean, there's no other way to describe it other than fucking enormous. But it's huge. But, and it's one dog. Always got to respect when it's a one dog performance. None of this bullshit where there's like, 9 dogs swapping them out like they're the Olsen twins. But this is, he is, it's just not much of a movie for me, but the dog people I know were, bereft watching it.
I do know that Demi Moore was at Cannes with her tiny dog. The substance isn't at Telluride, it'll be at TIFF, and that dog's not in the movie, I don't think. But, the tiny dog could be coming around to challenge the big dog.
I think it'd be a short fight, but I don't know why the substance isn't here. It feels like a big missed opportunity for Telluride and for Mubi. I'm sure Mubi would have liked it to be here, but I guess it's a little bit boundary pushing for Telluride. Telluride usually only has like one movie that. Well,
like Saltburn famously played so poorly at Telluride last year, so I wonder if they're like, oh, okay, no, thank you. Yeah, and the substance makes Saltburn look like. Fucking Harold in the Purple Crayon. So maybe it would have been a little bit much for some of the audiences here, but I think that movie is just sensational and about as fun a time as you can have if you have the stomach for it at the movies this year. And Demi Moore is absolutely brilliant and so raw and literally naked, but like so out front about aging in Hollywood and all these things that it does feel, and I'm very careful about how I apply this word in the context of performances in awards, but it does feel like a genuinely brave performance to me. And I would love for it would be extremely rare for something that genre coded to be in the Best Actress race, but if ever it was going to happen. It's a good comeback story. Speaking of actresses and boundary pushing and things that aren't at Telluride, did you see Baby Girl, which has premiered at Venice already? Okay, so we're both still waiting on that one.
Yeah, I can't wait. Everything about it sounds very up my alley. So
I think our friend Joe Reed tweeted that Nicole Kidman and Adrian Brody are both getting awards buzz. So it's really feeling like 2003 out there.
Well, I don't know if you're ready to pivot to the Best Actor conversation, but I think the Brutalist, which stars
let's
Adrian
talk about
Brody,
The Brutalist, which is not at Telluride. It is at Venice, but you got to see it.
I did. It is I saw it with Adrian Brody's parents, in fact. But it is certainly the most Adrian Brody performance since The Pianist. And in all honesty,
it's
probably
like 3.5 hours long.
The best,
sheer screen time, it's got to be there.
He is the titular brutalist, although a much softer and humane performance than that, architectural description might imply. But yeah, I mean, he does very well playing heavily accented Eastern European Jews who try to sort of escape the Holocaust. And that is what he did in The Pianist. It's what he's doing here. That movie is going to be a very tough sell. I mean, you're talking about the Oscar conversation presumes that it gets distribution. It's a 3.5-hour movie by Brady Corbett. It is not hand-holding. It's not audience-friendly. It's certainly his most accessible film, but
it's getting raves out of Venice, like big old raves.
People need to dial it back a bit. It is a very good movie. It has a tortured relationship with its own genius, much like the protagonist of the film. I think a lot of it doesn't quite work. The first half is stronger than the second. And people at Venice are really hungry for some red meat. And that movie, because of its size, shot in VistaVision, projected in 70 millimeter.
We love to see it.
It is a hefty work, a swing for the fences, the kind of thing that only European money can buy. And I totally empathize with the desire to latch onto it as this sort of major object. And I think the movie is almost but not quite worthy of that acclaim.
Well, I have rearranged my Toronto schedule to make time for all 3.5 hours of The Brutalist. So if I have regrets, you weren't. All right, 3.5 hours going by fast. Or let's talk about Tough Cells then. And I don't know how any kind of acting race fits in here, but the Nickel Boys did premiere at Telluride as its world premiere.
It's just Nickel Boys. It's
just
cleaner.
Nickel Boys?
Yeah.
Is the book not The Nickel Boys?
The book was The Nickel Boys.
Oh, I'm going to make that mistake a lot of times.
Ross said, no, thank you.
Nickel Boys is cleaner.
Drop the article. And then he made one of the great American masterpieces of this decade. So who is anyone to...
which many people do not seem to know what to make of.
Well, things that are really hot right now are music, like anti-musicals, movies with plot twists, and movies with audacious formal gambits.
Okay.
And I would say that Nickel Boys falls under several of those categories. I don't want to articulate more than that, but it is entirely told in the first person. It does not feel like a video game because the cinematography and the custom camera rigs they made and the poetry in which it's applied is just so beautiful and so profound. It never really has that feeling like you're watching Hardcore Henry or whatever the fuck the movie was called.
So wait, just to be clear, like this is like where the camera is a point of view. So there's not an actor playing the main character. It is the camera.
No, there is.
Instead. Oh,
yes, there is. You are
interesting
behind the eyes of the main character when he is talking. The sound is as if you're in your head, like it's muffled in a way. That conceit is developed as the movie goes on and other characters are introduced. About 30 minutes in, you're starting to, as beautiful and memorable as every single image is, you're starting to think, how am I going to emotionally connect to this story about a reform school in Florida during the Jim Crow South, where Black boys who are arrested for crimes like, being the passenger in a car, for example, are put and horribly abused. How am I going to emotionally connect to this character? Because he is really just an avatar in this point. And then Ramel Ross finds a way to flip that on its head and make this device, which was sort of distancing to begin with, so deeply humanizing and inviting, and its power starts to dimensionalize and accrue and build, and it doesn't hit you with a hammer in its final moments when there's some rather jarring revelations. It's definitely more of like a velvet hammer. It's a soft touch, but I think that is one of the movie's great strengths. It much better articulates the ideas that it's trying to convey, and I don't really want to get into it in any great length now. You can read my review on Indiewire. It was quite complimentary. But it is a movie that, I was getting emotional not watching the film, but walking home from it. The next morning I woke up overcome and started writing about it. And like Joshua Oppenheimer's The End, which is probably not going to factor into the Oscar conversation in any real way, and is an anti-musical with Tilda Swinton and Michael Shannon and George Mackay. That's another movie where I wasn't feeling an outpouring of emotion watching it, but started to sort of, as you realize the shape of the movie and what it's trying to do towards the end as it comes together, it begins to build in you in a sort of a multitude of drops, to paraphrase our beloved Cloud Atlas, and has really stayed with me. I do think that Nickel Boys is one of the great American films of this decade so far, and it's not going to be for everybody. There are going to be people who bounce right off its formal gambit, but I think that the people who are willing to roll with it are never going to forget it.
What you're saying is reminding me that multiple people have compared it to The Zone of Interest to me. It sounds like a very similar, not formal, not content-wise, but in terms of like formal gambits, emotional distancing, surprise wallops. It all sounds like it's right there.
Its commitment to the bit is definitely on a level with The Zone of Interest. But it is a lot, it's a character-driven story. There are real emotional trajectories in it. It is not as emotionally distanced as The Zone of Interest by any stretch.
It's hard to match that, honestly.
Yeah. And it's not going for that. I mean, these characters by name, you care deeply for them. It is not really like that. But, it's commitment to the bit, also all the rage. I mean, that movie, Better Man. I was just, Katey, you and I talk all the time about The Greatest Showman, which is it
stays with us.
Yeah, I mean, sure it does. I mean, that
an
movie,
essential part of your household, as I'm led to understand.
The American household, the earthly household, really. And Michael Gracie, who directed it, he was a choreographer, he was a visual effects guy, came from nowhere, and then seemed to disappear just as fast. And I was often thinking, like, that movie was so alien, it felt beamed from another planet. And I was like, he's always got that hat on. Have you seen pictures of him? And he's never taken it off. I just saw him in the urinals, he was wearing it. I saw him in the photos, years ago, he's wearing it. And I'm like, is it a Professor Quirrell from Harry Potter thing going on? Like, I don't know.
Oh, yeah, there's his
I don't know
hat.
his whole deal. But this guy is a fucking visionary. I am convinced after seeing Better Man. His grand return to form. He made a Pink documentary about the pop star on tour between Greatest Showman and here. But this is a Robbie Williams biopic. And it is the cure to all of the officially, what's the word I'm looking for? Not licensed, but
sanctioned.
Yeah, sure. I mean, like these endorsed musical biopics, your Bohemian Rhapsodies, your All I Want to Do Is Your, things like that.
I Want to Dance with Somebody.
I Want to Dance with Somebody. Yeah,
Rocket Man.
Rocket Man. Although Rocket Man has a little bit of an edge to it, and Robbie Williams is very good friends with Elton John, and there is some
Elton John has a documentary going to TIFF, so he's not going to be upstaged.
But I'm burying the lead here. So this is a Robbie Williams biopic.
Are you allowed to talk about what this movie's actually doing?
I mean, they're gonna need people to, because it's gonna be a thing. But like, it is, from the outset, on paper, a pretty traditional music biopic. It's about him growing up and becoming famous and his problems with drugs and yada yada. And the one difference, and it's subtle, is that Robbie Williams is played by a computer-generated monkey the entire film. It looks like, I don't know because I haven't read the press notes yet. It looks like it was it's a dead ringer for the apes or the monkeys you would see in the Planet of the Apes movies. It looks like it was designed by Weta. And so just imagine Bohemian Rhapsody if Freddie Mercury was played by Caesar from the Planet of the Apes movies. And
is it not explained at any point?
No,
Everyone just treats this monkey. Okay.
This is the thing. It is absolutely not explained. It is meant to be a reflection of the way that Robbie Williams sees himself as sort of a performing monkey.
A trained monkey.
At one point, someone refers to him, I think 2 hours into the movie, someone refers to him as an animal. But it is not mentioned at all. It's clear that like everybody around him looks at him as a human being. I was wondering when he falls in love if they were going to kiss, and they like the human woman in him, and they do, but they sort of dance around it for a while. But the director, Michael Gracie, visionary, gets up before the movie and explained, that when
he told you what you were in for.
Yes, he told us in person. He was like, the one thing I want to say is that I would do these long interviews with Robbie, and he would always compare himself to a monkey, and then one day it hit me, he should be a monkey in the movie. And it's like, only Michael Gracie. They are, I think they are going to have either a title card or like a video introduction that plays before every screening of this movie at your local AMC, because I think audiences are going to be shouting "what the fuck" at the screen.
I mean, the fact that we're getting the same fall as a Pharrell Lego biopic, like the music biopic gambits are
that's
out of control.
A documentary. The Pharrell movie's a documentary.
You're right, but it's like a documentary bio. They've been very fuzzy with the way they describe it.
Yeah, it's the same principle that it's just like, yeah, we're all Legos now. I didn't see that one, but but like this, it is clearly by the director of The Greatest Showman. The musical numbers, particularly over the absolutely electric first half of the movie, are
so
so
liked
colorful.
This movie?
Oh yeah, it was a lot of fun. It's like so colorful, so inventive, and Robbie Williams' personality. Because the thing is, the difference that separates it from all those other movies, other than the monkey thing, is that the first words of the movie is he's like, I don't want to quote him directly, but he's like, I'm a huge piece of shit. And he's like laughing about it. And so it's not like, oh, son, if you just dream, you'll be able to achieve it. He's just like, fuck you. I want to be famous. It's all that matters. I'm the most insecure person on this earth. I need daddy's love. He liked Frank Sinatra, so I need to be the new Frank Sinatra. The last line of the movie is he looks at the camera and he's like, go fuck yourself. Like it's and like every pore of this movie is suffused with his jocular personality, and it feels like such a relief compared to some of the other movies that it's aping, pun kind of intended. So I did enjoy that.
To rearrange my tip sketch to see it.
I have no idea when Paramount's going to put it out, but it gets a little long. I mean, the like these movies tend to do, the parts that are sad when he's sort of falling off. I don't think the movie has the emotional nuance it needs to sustain being that down in the dumps for so long. But it's still, I was very emotional by the end.
Nuance because it starts.
I was very emotional by the end, and I definitely think it's well. If you're a Greatest Showman fan, you cannot miss it.
All right, we gotta start wrapping up, but let's hit two more big ones before we get done. Speaking of sticking with the bit, you had the snarkiest tweet I've seen about Saturday Night, a movie that seems to be going over pretty well. I guess it premiered on actual Saturday night and Telluride in Toronto. It's playing on a Tuesday, which I find very confusing.
Mercifully, they premiered it at like 7:15 and not 11:30.
That was kind of them. But no, it seems to have gone over well. Even if I would have predicted you would have been grouchy about it. So it doesn't sway my opinion on how it's going to be.
Well, Katey, you've done like 2 podcasts a week with me for 10 years, so I think you've been paying attention. Listen, when the lights go down on every movie, I want nothing more than to see the greatest film that I've ever seen.
Of course.
This was not a movie that I felt was particularly, I like Saturday Night Live, but these sort of beat by beat recreations that it's like, here's the thing that happened. They don't tend to knock my socks off. And I was irritated by every second of this film. I mean, it did not even meet my low expectations for it. I have never in my life seen a movie that is about less than this is.
It's about one episode of a comedy show. Of course it is. It
has absolutely nothing on its mind other than being fan fiction and some pretty high-end cosplay about Saturday Night Live. All of its cards are on the table. It takes place in real time, except for not really, because it actually moves slower than real time. It's supposed to be the 90 minutes before from 10 to 11:30, but the movie is 105 minutes long.
Wow.
Which means that when it says it's 10:45 and you look at your watch and you know that an hour of the movie's gone by, you're like, I am so fucking bored. This is moving slower than time. How can you do that? It's deranged. And there's no characters. It's just, here's a point you referenced, and here's a point, and the whole ethos of the movie is that they're doing something that's never been seen before. This is radical. Milton Berle is still Uncle Milt on television, and here they are getting a bunch of kids off the street to do sketch comedy, and it's hosted by George Carlin, and the whole movie is acting as though, we have been steeped in 50 years of Saturday Night Live. It's purely reference point after reference point. If you saw this movie and had never seen an episode of Saturday Night Live, you would have absolutely no idea what's going on or why you should care.
So you're saying it's not going to do great overseas, is what I'm getting from this.
No. They may need to make, as there are international versions of Saturday Night Live, they may have to make, the international versions of Jason Reitman may have to make their own equivalent.
Expensive.
But this movie, listen, I try to be as self-aware as possible. I know that, people might be more predisposed to liking this than I was, but in no universe should this movie be mentioned in the same breath as the Oscars in any capacity.
I'm not in full control of that. I don't know how it's going to go.
I mean, in the event that it were nominated, it would be a laughingstock for generations. It would be an everything. What was that movie called? With fucking Scott Rudin shit show. The 9/11 movie.
Extremely Loud and Incredibly Close.
Yeah. It would be like that. It would be like The Tourist getting nominated at the Golden Globes. It would be like that sort of disaster. But I will say, not that there's any acting awards potential here, because the only role that is more than just cosplay is Gabriel LaBelle, who was wildly miscast as Lorne Michaels. Lorne Michaels was 30 when SNL premiered and going through the beginnings of a divorce. Gabriel LaBelle is 21, looking like he came directly from his bar mitzvah, and at no point does any of it seem credible. He was great in The Fabelmans, but this is just not his fault. He's completely wrong for this. But in their one or two lines, Dylan O'Brien, the guy whose name I don't know, who was in May December, who plays Chevy Chase.
That guy.
Yeah, I mean, they do such a fun job. And Cooper Hoffman, I was actually very impressed. I love Cooper Hoffman, Licorice Pizza. He plays Dick Ebersol. He's sort of like the yes man, gutless cheerleader. But there's so clearly more going on, like under the surface for him, behind his eyes, and he finally gets a scene towards the end of the film where he's able to share with us what that is. And he is a great actor.
See, this
and it
is fun.
is. No, it's not. I mean, it's. I mean, and I've talked to other people who I think whose tastes and whose appetite for, popcorn fluff is maybe not as rancorous as mine. People who tend to be a little bit easier to please, and they were also really put off by this movie. People who I will tell you off mic, and you will be surprised to hear.
Sure, there's raves out there.
But you know what?
The fact that it could be divisive is not super surprising.
It's not divisive. It's bad, but people want to clap like seals. That's fine. But it's shot on 16 millimeter, and they are going to put it in theaters for a legitimate theatrical run. And on those 2 points, I cannot argue. So I hope it makes all the money in the world.
There we go. Okay, let's wrap it up with the movie you first mentioned when you guessed what people thought would have the most buzz. Conclave. Those cardinals feuding and scheming behind closed doors.
Oh my gosh.
I have read the book Conclave, and I do know where this story goes. I do want to. I feel like it is important to talk about, but also I don't want to spoil it for people. So what can you give me about Conclave that doesn't get too much into where the story takes us?
I certainly laughed out loud when it got there. I'll tell you that much.
I kind of did reading the book too, which I had a great time reading.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, and again, this is sometimes the Oscar conversation I find productive in how it can sort of elevate certain movies and get eyeballs and things that otherwise wouldn't have an outlet for them. And sometimes I think it does a disservice to movies that it frames them in a way that isn't helpful for them. Conclave is a very, very silly movie. Conclave is a lot of fun. Your parents will like it, no matter how old you are. And it will play great on cable TV. It'll play great on planes. It is, they have to pick a pope, and there's all sorts of intrigue, and all of the cardinals are wonderful character actors. And they're all sort of just biting in with every tooth they got into the meat of the script. And they're all having fun. They're all standing under the Sistine Chapel and shouting, "How dare you!" And, Jacques! And someone, it's like watching the New York Critics Circle vote. I mean, it's exactly what this movie is. They all go through the ballots, and then there's terrorist attacks. It's fucking, ridiculous.
There are no terrorist attacks on the New York Film Critics Circle, let's be clear.
Not so far, but there are love children. I mean, there's all this wild shit. It's a really, really silly movie, and this is, I think, Edward Berger, who directed All Is Quiet on the Western Front. This is his lane. This is not a great artist. This is a very skillful journeyman type. And
we need those.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, he's been rumored to direct the new James Bond movie. Perfect fit. He will make it look fantastic. It'll have real muscle behind it, and he is not going to fuck with the formula, and that is what you need. This movie has a thundering score. It's pounding. It's intrigue. It is very hard not to be entertained by it. If you want to throw flowers at Ralph Fiennes just because he's overdue, fine.
That's what I was going to ask. Please let us do that.
But I don't think it's he holds the movie down, but he spends most of it playing me on our other podcast, just being
well, he's trying to get all these bitchy cardinals in line. It's a hard job.
Yeah, I mean, he's having a crisis of faith, as we all are in the movie. Not in God, but in the institution of the church, and as I am with Hollywood all the time. I relate. But it's not a particularly dynamic performance. But he and Stanley Tucci completely understand the assignment. There's an Italian actor who plays this very right-wing strongman sort of cardinal who is so much fun, and I loved. It's a lot of fun. I don't think. I would like to live in a world where that does not have to be an Oscar movie, that it can just be a fun movie for adults.
Again, I don't know where that's going to take us, but a fun movie for adults sounds great.
Yeah.
Okay, to wrap it up, sounds like Telluride vibes are good. It feels like it's back. Everything's doing what it's supposed to do this year.
Yeah, more or less. I mean, the last thing I'll say just about the festival is that there's a lot of holdovers this year. Ironically, not the holdovers last year. Yeah. But because of the strikes, I just think there's a little bit less in the pipeline of the kind of awards corridor movies that Telluride would like to premiere. And so there is a greater emphasis on playing movies that were at Sundance and at Cannes. And so there's actually been very little for me to see up here, which is fine because I have to sit in my shabby little room and write all day long anyway. But it's a lot of catch up for sure. I think that bodes well for movies from earlier in the year continuing to make inroads and find new audiences. Yeah. And so I think you could see, Eurenora's, which is not out yet, obviously, but premiered in May, and things like that blow up. So
that's exciting.
A lot to look forward to.
Well, David, based on past precedent, I say I'll see you in Toronto, but usually I walk past you while you're like frantically typing, sitting on some table outside.
No, you will see me and Shersha and the rest of the gang.
Oh yeah, the Stony Pictures Classics dinner. Yeah. Much to discuss. So yes, thank you for calling me from the mountains in the meantime.
Well, thanks for having me.
Okay, so we'll be right back in a moment with my conversation with the star of Strange Darling, Willa Fitzgerald. So now we'll hear my conversation with Willa Fitzgerald. She is the breakout star of the extremely buzzy serial killer thriller Strange Darling, which is in theaters now. It premiered at Fantastic Fest last year. If you've heard anything about this movie, you've probably heard people telling you to go in totally blind. Even the trailer says that. And Willa and I stick to a pretty spoiler-free conversation for a lot of this interview, talking about the work she did with writer and director J.T. Molnar and what it took to dig into the really physical and intense scenes she has with her co-star Kyle Gallner. But she did let me get into spoilers too. It's one of the first times she's really been able to talk openly about this inventive movie and what it requires of her. So if you want to check the show notes for the exact moment where you should turn the interview off, if you haven't seen Strange Darling, you should probably do that and then come back and listen to it. Obviously, once you've seen it, you're going to want to hear what she has to say. And Willa Fitzgerald is a name you're going to be hearing a lot about after this performance, I think. She's been working basically since the moment she graduated college. You've seen her in shows like the Scream TV series or Jack Reacher. But Strange Darling gives her the opportunity to do so much, not just with this script from J.T. Molnar that chops up time and really upends your expectations, but also the cinematography from Giovanni Ribisi, the actor. He is making his debut as a director of photography here, and it's a pretty exceptional one at that. We talked about all of it and how it feels to finally be able to talk openly about this movie that's meant so much to her. So hear it all in my conversation with the star of Strange Darling, Willa Fitzgerald. Willa Fitzgerald, thank you so much for being here with me to talk about Strange Darling. I have been told we are allowed to talk about what the movie is about, which even in the trailers, it says like no one should go, you should go in absolutely cold. So we're going to talk and then give everyone a fair warning that we're going to get into spoilers. Do you feel ready? You've been sitting on the secrets of this movie for so long. Are you ready to really be able to dig into it?
Honestly, this will be my first conversation really talking about spoilers.
That's really exciting.
Yeah.
So, I mean, when this movie premiered at Fantastic Fest in September, it was during the actors' strike. It was such a strange fall festival season where these movies were coming out and really popping, and the actors weren't really allowed to talk about it. So, like, how strange was that experience and kind of waiting for this, really remarkable performance of yours to come to light?
Oh, thank you. Making a movie is always hard, and you always have those moments where you feel like it might not be birthed. And I think that when we found out that it was going to be a Fantastic Fest, we were excited because it felt like a good home for the movie. And there also was that, I think, little bit of fear that it would maybe be our last chance to celebrate it because you never know what is going to happen next for a film. But after it premiered there, it got such good reviews that I think we started to feel kind of confident that it would have another opportunity further down the road, hopefully after the actors' strike, where we would all get to be together and celebrate this thing we made, which at this point we made 2 years ago.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, you've had a long career with, like movies and television, and that, that idea that you never know where something's going to go, I think is really hard one. Like how, you graduated from college, you kind of really started working right out of college. How quickly did you get used to that idea that like, well, I'm not in charge. I made this thing. I don't know what its life is going to be. Is that a hard lesson to learn as an actor?
I definitely am someone who enjoys control and knowing what's happening next. And so, yeah, that definitely, I think, will be a lifelong lesson that I'm learning and relearning. But I do think that, I think that luckily I love to be on set and I love to work. And I think that my philosophy has always been, if there's enough of a drive for me to do something, I'm kind of happy to just go along for the ride and see what comes of it. And I feel like that's led me down some interesting paths. And I don't know, it's kind of the thing where you never really know what's going to come next. In fact, one of the reasons why I got this job, because I only ever had a meeting with JT, was because his editor was editing this film that I had done. And he actually emailed JT out of the blue and was like, you got to check out this girl, Willa. And that was a big reason why I got this movie, which is such a funny, weird, serendipitous coincidence.
So you met with JT about this. He had one feature film that came out about like 8 years ago at this point. I think I know you guys shot this 2 years ago, so it wasn't quite as big a gap. So I get the sense that he was also kind of figuring out how to get a movie made, figuring out how to get it seen. What were those, initial conversations? And, we'll talk in more detail later about why this is a part that might take someone to persuade to take on. How did he get you there?
In our first conversation, the thing that I really needed to talk to him about was the love that I have for the character of the lady. And I just wanted to make sure that he also shared that perspective on the character, because to me, and the reason why after reading it the first time I wanted to do it so badly was because to me, I saw the story as having so much heart and so much truth. And I just kind of fell in love with this character. And I also knew that there were other options for how one could tell this story. And in that first phone call, JT and I were just so on the same page about our love for the lady. And I think that's a large part of why I got the job, was because I was just very insistent that was the story that I was interested in telling. It was the one that was like full of humanity and compassion and love for this person.
Yeah. I mean, you hear so often about scripts where people read it being like, that's the best script I've ever read. It's so creative. And then they never get made. Like, that's the graveyard of Hollywood. And this sounds like something that just jumps immediately off the page. What do you think is the trick that makes it like both inventive but really work as a film? Is it JT's talent, or is there something about this, non-linear, like chapter jumping structure that just makes it work so well when it's actually on screen?
Well, I think it's a very exciting movie to see and to read for that same reason. I think that the structure of the movie does propel it forward in a way that is just like really kinetic and keeps you locked in. I mean, I distinctly remember when I read the script, I did not check my text. I did not check my email. That is not something I can say of most times when I sit down to read the script, unfortunately. And I think that it also, as a script, was just so distinct about what it was. It was very clear to me reading it the first time. In the stage directions, JT had already written in what lenses he wanted to use, what music he wanted to use, what portions of like the songs he wanted to have where. And I think that oftentimes when I read scripts, I don't walk away having felt like I saw the movie. But I walked away from reading this script being like, oh, I've just watched the movie and I know what this movie is.
What the fuck?
He's got it good!
So do I!
I think that's a really exciting feeling as an actor, because you've already like jumped 4 weeks ahead in terms of like communication with the director about what their vision is. Like, I knew what his vision was, and I also knew what I could bring to that vision that was unique and special in some way. And so I feel like when it was just really clear to me how I could fit into this project and serve the story that I hoped he was trying to tell.
Yeah. But then also, how often have you read a script being like, I get the vision, I get what this filmmaker's trying to do, and it's like, funding never came through, or nothing ever happened. Like, it's not easy to, even when you have that perfect vision, getting it to actually exist is so hard.
I know. And I think that, it was certainly a pretty wild shoot. There were wildfires going on. It was a hard shoot. And I think that kind of every day we left work both feeling so tired and also so energized by the work that we were doing, because it was one of those special movies where the daily lift was so extreme, and yet the kind of accomplishment and excitement that we felt at the end of every day matched that. And I think we all just showed up to set every day being so excited that we were there making this movie, and so grateful that we were still making this movie.
How hard have you found it in your career to like keep that high of being on set, like where, you know, you're in a scene and you got to like move an inch to get the light to hit right, like to keep that energy to it? Like you said, you left the set every day with a high on this. Like, is that a rare thing for you in your career to kind of feel that sense that you're all working in the same direction every day, day in and day out?
I mean, I think every job kind of functions differently in that sense. I really love being at work. I love the experience of being on a job and clocking in and clocking out. And I think that my job as an actor is to be able to kind of zen out through all of the light changes, the going again. But I will say shooting on film really does limit the amount of takes that you're doing that aren't about performance, because it's a finite resource. We only have so much film to shoot in a day. And so everyone's really bringing their A game at every point, because you don't want to have to go again because something's out of focus, and you don't want to have to go again because the light wasn't in the right position. You want to be able to just be getting kind of gold every time you're rolling the camera. And this was my first time getting to shoot on film, and I just absolutely loved it. Yeah,
it's crazy how rare it's become in like 10 years, basically. Well, and on this, you've got a director of photography, Giovanni Ribisi, who is an actor who I'm imagining is very familiar with the experience of having to go again because the lens is not working. So did you notice that difference there in having an actor behind the camera in that way?
I mean, yes. What a cool and rare experience. I don't know of any other DPs who were actors for years before and moving into that world. I mean, Giovanni is both an insanely talented actor and an insanely talented DP, and he also operated a lot of the shots. And I think what was really interesting to me and totally unexpected, I mean, you always have a really close relationship with the camera operators, or at least I do when I'm shooting, because they're right there. No matter what you're doing, whether it's, you know, whatever's happening, they're with you in that scene. And it was a really cool experience to get to have Giovanni be right there in all of these scenes and really almost kind of become this extra character. And his energy was just really present. There's a lot of scenes in the movie that I really love that are kind of more private moments for the lady, where it's really just her alone, whether, you know, she's just kind of in a different part of a room or if she actually is alone somewhere. And those were kind of always just really special moments to get to shoot with Giovanni, because there was this extra person to kind of work off of.
Yeah. So the other person who you're building trust with on set is, of course, Kyle Gallner, who you're sharing a lot of these really intense scenes with. You guys have to really go to some places as your characters who are really kind of breaking down each other's boundaries in a lot of ways. How do you get to a place where you can do those scenes together and make them like really terrifying for the audience, but, you know, safe for each other?
Yeah. In a lot of ways, I think we got really lucky. Kyle is a great actor and a very easy person to become friends with. We only had probably a week before we started shooting in Oregon together. And I kind of felt like I knew him because we actually have the same agent. And so I knew as soon as his deal closed that he was going to be in the movie. And we had a
What a Hollywood story there.
I know,
That's how
totally.
it all happens.
100%. 100%. And also I knew how much my agent loved him. And so that gave me just, you know, a little bit of an in already. And we had a phone call before we got out to Oregon. And then as soon as we got to Oregon, we just immediately started trying to hang out as much as we could and talking about the characters and talking about our feelings about how we like to work on set. And just so that we, going into it, got to have a little bit of a shared common ground together. And interestingly, too, we shot some of the most intense stuff really close to the beginning. We started shooting at the old hippie house, so the stuff with Barbara and Ed, and then everything that happens after that. And we shot that chunk mostly in chronological order. And so we get to a kind of climactic point quite quickly. And I remember that scene in the icebox, we shot that probably on day 5 or something.
Wow.
And it was one of those scenes where the first time I read the script, I remember kind of noticing that scene and being like, ooh, that's kind of the emotional crux of this story that we're telling. And I knew that it was just one of those scenes where like you kind of have to get it right, and you don't really get to then fix it in a different scene if you can't get it right there. And I was very nervous that day when I knew that was the day that we were going to be shooting that, and we got it, and we got it plus some. And it was one of those moments where I think we all walked away from that day feeling such a sense of freedom, because we had captured something that I think we all felt really excited about, that was this sort of emotional heart to the story. And it gave us then this huge amount of space to just play in all of the other moments that lead up to that moment, and the other moments that follow from that moment, because we had this like anchor point. And, you know, you just kind of get lucky or not in shooting order, because it's always about locations and what's available when. And I feel like we got so lucky getting to do that scene so early on, because it really did connect me and Kyle in all of these ways, because it's a quite emotionally vulnerable scene, and just gave us this great foundation to kind of spring forward from.
See, I would have thought that the hotel room scenes, which happen earlier in the chronology of the story, kind of sprinkled in throughout the film, where they're sex scenes in some ways, but then there's also a lot of like, power dynamics that are shifting throughout those scenes. Those seem to me like they would be the scarier ones, but it sounds like that wasn't as intense for you.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I probably find emotional vulnerability scarier.
Well, if you want me to be your therapist, we can work that out. We'll unpack it.
Exactly. I think that those scenes felt less scary in the shooting of them, because we already had this solid foundation. The hotel room scenes, we'd already been shooting for probably 3 weeks, maybe 4 weeks by the time we were shooting that stuff. And Kyle and I were just so connected by that point that it just felt fun, honestly. Kyle's a delight to work with, because he is an actor who is present, and that's just not always what you get. He's so there with you, and every take is so exciting and different because of that. And you know where you're going, obviously, but you don't necessarily know how you're getting there.
Okay, so to get into the spoilery part of the conversation, listeners beware if you have not seen Strange Darling. I think all the trailers are right that you should go in as blind as you can. Hopefully people have seen it by the time they're listening to this. What I loved about seeing this for the first time, and I'm wondering if you felt it when you were reading the script, is that the true nature of the lady, her revealing her nature, happens really slowly. There's not a moment where the camera turns around and says she's been the evil one this whole time. You kind of have to figure it out on your own. And did you have that same moment reading the script of being like, oh my God, like I'm 3 scenes behind on what's actually going on here?
Yeah, definitely. I think that it is this kind of slow burn that happens. And I think it's kind of a beautiful process of unfolding understanding as you're sort of putting the pieces together. And I definitely had that experience as I was reading it. And I think that that's also kind of, obviously protecting the experience for the viewer, I think is really important. And I love that people are being so careful about spoilers, but also at the same time, I don't think you can really spoil the movie. I do think it is one of those things that holds up to successive viewings, because it's not really about necessarily a twist. It's about how a story unfolds. And you get to experience that, regardless of whether you know a secret about,
Well, how does that affect your performance, though? And especially in these opening, the first scenes that you see in the movie where you're running away from him, like there really is that sense of desperation and really raw fear, which I think once we know who the lady really is, like, I don't know that I would believe she'd be that afraid, but like it's there in the moment. Like, how does that affect your performance, or does it not? Do you just have to play it real?
Yeah, I mean, I would say the lady is that afraid. When I read the script, or when I started working on the script and I knew I was doing the job, the first thing I did was I put everything in chronological order, because the most important thing to me, and I knew that JT shared that opinion because of our first conversation and all the conversations we had after was truthfulness and was authenticity and was building this character from a place of like actual, how would I play this character if it was in a naturalism, realism, sort of like living room drama place. And so when I looked at the script in chronological order, the most important thing to me was tracking this emotional journey with this other character and understanding the psychological place that she's coming from that's leading to the actions that she's taking. And JT and I have talked about it a lot too. I think that there's a large portion of this story that is sort of an allegory for all of these different stages of a relationship, of being in love with someone, of deep feeling for another person in your life. And I think that all of those emotions that you see her go through, for me as the lady, were deeply true.
Yeah.
There wasn't any sort of audience manipulation happening for either me or JT in those moments.
I feel like once the audience knows the score, I feel like I noticed, and you can tell me if this was happening before, like when the lady is stepping into her power is, you know, there's this mask that you put on a few times of like this desperate, helpless woman and then use it to your advantage. But there's a power shift, there's a posture shift, there's something when it's like, I am in charge, I'm going to do what it takes here. What does that feel like inside for you to embody that really terrifying power that she has?
Yeah, I mean, I think interestingly, I think that the presentation of power for the lady is actually coming from a place of fundamentally feeling misunderstood, right? Like, I think that there is, at least there's some scenes I'm thinking of in particular where she's talking to the cops in the car, where I think it's kind of more like, this is who you want me to be. Here it is. I'll be it. This is who you think I am. This is why you think I'm doing this. Here you go. And I think that I don't think that she sees herself as a villain. And I don't think that she sees herself as a serial killer. And I think that I think that there is something in those moments that really comes from a place of defiance more than actual ownership of this sort of like label that's been given to her.
Yeah. Are there aspects of this character or, you know, what you're being asked to do physically or anything in this movie that you didn't know you were capable of or wondered if you were capable of before you took this on?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think I definitely, 100%. I mean, I remember reading the script for the first time and like feeling like a little bit sick just because I wanted to do the job so badly. And I also was overwhelmed by the lift of what this job would be. And I think that, you know, I think that you don't really ever know if you can do something until you're doing it. And I think that there is this trust fall that happens every day you go to set. There's never an assurance that you are going to be able to do it. You're just trusting in the preparation that you've done and your ability to show up and be present. I think that there's a lot of overcoming of that sort of fear as an actor in a recurring way. And I think that some of that actually is echoed kind of beautifully in the trajectory of the lady as well.
Yeah. So when you saw the finished film, was there anything that felt like a revelation to you or like a new sense of confidence in what you guys had done?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I really don't like watching myself. I don't like watching things I've done. I often don't. I don't find it necessarily that helpful or instructive either. But I was very excited to see this because I didn't get to see it for like a year after we made it. And when I finally did get to see it, I was honestly overwhelmed. I think I kind of like had a panic attack the whole time I watched it because I basically felt the same way I felt when we were shooting while I was watching it. It was one of those interesting things where like, I think because it's such an intense character, because it's such intense circumstances that she's going through, I kind of was just like mimicking the feelings that I was having while I was shooting, like as I was sitting in my seat watching it. And then I think once I kind of like came down from that intense adrenaline high, I realized how much I loved the movie. And I just like loved it as like an audience member. genuinely had this feeling walking away from it after seeing it for the first time of like, wow, like I do feel like we've made something that contributes something new to film in some way. And that's like the coolest feeling I've ever had, and I'm also my own worst critic. And so I think it was really, there was something kind of amazing for me in that experience that I've never had before. And I don't know if I'll ever have again. It was like a very pure experience of getting to watch something and really feeling proud of it kind of unequivocally.
Are you keeping the spoilers to yourself for people in your life and letting them be blown away with it like I was?
Yes, I'm trying to. I think I ruined the movie for a couple of my like closest friends when I knew I was going to go shoot it, and I think I might have like told them things, but that was 2 years ago, so they didn't remember I had told them that until after they'd seen the movie, and then they were like, "Oh, I think we did kind of know," and I was like, "Yeah, we probably did."
I assume you're going to get a lot of texts of just people like being like, "Holy shit, I cannot believe what I just witnessed," and I bet that feels great.
This is one of those movies that has inspired a lot of people to actually send texts when they see it, which isn't always how it goes, because I think it does. It is one of the things that like, catches you off guard.
There's
you gotta talk about it.
There's telling silences, and then there's telling floods of texts, and it sounds like you know which one.
Exactly. My mom took about a day and a half to call me. I think she was. She was disturbed.
She's proud but overwhelmed and disturbed. All of those things all at once.
Exactly.
This show is edited by Brett Fuchs and co-produced by Brett Fuchs and me. Our theme music is by Dave Gonzalez. Thanks again to my co-host, David Ehrlich. Get the Prestige Junkie newsletter by going to theankler.com and subscribe to this podcast on Apple, Spotify, where you can answer this week's poll, or wherever you get your podcast. A reminder, the next episode you hear will be recorded live at the Toronto International Film Festival with Hugh Grant joining me on stage. If you'll be in Toronto, I hope to see you there. One way or another, we will see you next week.